let's say where we are. Until the last week, we were mostly focused upon PowerShell in order to build our resources like a resource group or a storage account or a container. So we were on to all these resources and we said, how do you go ahead and do something known, or how do you go ahead and let's say write something called as a PowerShell, uh, understand what is, let's say, the language of PowerShell, and then go ahead and build all these resources out here. See, but the issue with PowerShell is that it is called as an imperative syntax. What do I mean by that? Is that, see, when you are dealing with a scripting language, you need to have a bit of understanding about object orientation, and also very importantly, you need to understand the order of resource creation. Like for example, you cannot be creating a storage account first and the resource group next. You have to come with a resource group no matter what, and only then go ahead and create a storage account out there. Secondly, or thirdly, I would say it has a lot of dependency on the knowledge of a user's knowledge. The reason that I'm telling here is because in a PowerShell, in a program or in a script like PowerShell, I need to go ahead and I need to write my own logic to go ahead and say that, you know what, if the resource group doesn't exist, then go ahead and let's say create it out. If there are multiple things, then do a for each loop. If there are, let's say, multiple arrays, do a for loop. If there is something, do a do while loop. So I'll have to put my loop. I'll have to know my logic right. Chances are I might make a lot of mistake. Also, this is serial in nature. What do I mean by this? Is very simple. If you have 100 resource groups or 100 storage accounts to be created, you are using a for each loop. So what PowerShell normally does is that it'll go to the first item, create the resource group, go to the second item, create the resource group, third item, create the resource group, and so on and so forth, which means it's executing one after the other, which makes it time consuming. So for creation of an object or for creation of a resource, PowerShell might not be the best suit. But yes, for managing a resource, like for example, you created a storage account, uh, and your client comes back to you and tells you that, you know what, I created all my storage accounts in LRS. I have 100 storage accounts. Can you please go ahead and let's say scale it up to let's say standard GRS or standard RA GRS, something like that. Or the other way around is also possible. Maybe I've created some let's say storage accounts. I want to delete them, maybe 50 or 60. For those purposes, PowerShell will really help you a lot. But for resource creation, a better way to create it is by using a declarative syntax. So you have two different things out here, imperative syntaxing and also a declarative syntaxing. And the declarative syntax here means something like ARM templates, terraforms, and multiple, let's say, products that fall in this particular line, which don't require to have or don't require you to have any kind of a program understanding. It's just like you understand a small syntax and then it kind of let's say grows out of it. So no programming or no object orientation. You do not need to know the order of resource creation. So whatever that I have written here, it's undoing everything. So you do not need to know the order of resource creation. You can throw in any resource. Your ARM templates or terraforms are smart enough to understand what to create first and what to create next. You don't write to write. huge logics, like like the one the one we wrote, let's say in PowerShell, like what if it exists, then do this, get that, and no, you don't have to do that. It's parallel in nature, not serial in nature. So the time which is taken to create one resource group is the same time what it takes to create 100 resource groups out here, which gives it a very big edge. And if you look at a lot of companies, they prefer going with a declarative syntax over an imperative syntax, especially for resource creation. For resource management, it's a different question. For management of a resource, declarative is not that great. Declarative is great in creating and maintaining the state of a particular resource. But for managing an existing resource, I would say imperative syntax like bash scripting, shell scripting, PowerShell. These are great tools available out there in the market. And today, in today's lecture, we are going to, let's say, look at something known as ARM templates. We are going to understand what are ARM templates, what do you get out of ARM templates, how do you start writing an ARM template, and all these things out here. Yes, any questions till here? Any questions that I can take till you? Okay, so let's get into it. All right, so again, before I get started, can anyone tell me, just forget about ARM, can anyone tell me what do you mean by a template? What do you understand by template? Did anyone hear this term called template anytime?
The examples like models. So we
Example.
can
Hmm.
get
Okay.
like that and use further as a examples, and we can go through just like that.
Okay. Okay. Good point. Yes. Yes. Anyone else?
Predefined structures.
Predefined structures. Yes. Correct. That's right. So predefined structures or examples. Let's say I put it in a very generic mode, telling that email templates. If I have something like an email template, which means I have template, meaning I have a predefined structure, like I have my good morning or good evening or something like that. And after that, I have the body, wherein it is telling you, okay, fine, what do you want to write? Write it out. And at the end, you have thanks in your name and all these things. So you do not have to write your name. You do not have to, let's say, write all the. I mean, you do not have to write, let's say, all a lot of let's say junk in your email, which makes it a that you don't need to understand the structure. You can just go and write something in the body, and you can get started, and it is reusable. You can have different templates for, let's say, emails, and you can have different, sorry, you can have different templates for, let's say, different kinds of emails, and you can just reuse it. Just change the subject, send it across to someone, and yes, your job is done. This is how email templates, kind of work. Now, ARM was designed on the same lines. ARM templates, which is Azure Resource Manager templates, was designed on the same line, wherein Azure is telling, you know what, if you are going ahead, or if you have the capability to go ahead and, let's say, create an email using a template, why not create resources using a template, like a storage account or a web application or a virtual machine? Why can't we implement something called as a template out here? They said, okay, fine, great, let's get started with that. And the very basic, for you to understand ARM template, you need to understand the syntax of a language called JSON. Again, not in a lot of depth. We'll also look at how JSON really looks like and how do you develop an ARM template out of it. And JSON here stands for JavaScript Object Notation. The JavaScript Object Notation out here. So we'll start with the basics of JSON and understand further on how you can create an ARM template from a JSON out here. We'll understand how do you write something in JSON versus something in a text document, and then go further into something called as an ARM template out here. And in order to do this, right, in order to write a JSON, in order to write an ARM template, I would need an editor. I would need some kind of a tool to write this on. Simple notepad, I won't be able to write it because it is syntax heavy. So I won't be able to, let's say, put every syntax out here, remember everything, not required. But popular editors are available out there in the market. But one thing that I would choose, or one thing that I would suggest to install, is something known as a VS Code, Visual Studio Code. So if you go into Google and just see Visual Studio Code, the free tool, it's a very lightweighted tool. You'll just say, okay, fine, go ahead, download Visual Studio, and you can get started out here. Again, for the demo purpose, I'm not installing the tool on my machine. The tool is already there on my machine. If you can see my taskbar out here. So I just created a new machine out here for me on Azure, and I'll just go ahead and, okay, fine. I'll just go ahead and get started out here. So I'll say Visual Studio Code. Let's go into Visual Studio Code out here, official site. It's code.visualstudio.com. Download for Windows, it's selling. Okay, fine. I'll click on this one. It also offers, let's say, Visual Studio Code for Mac OSs and also Linux OSs out here. So, depending upon which kind of an operating system you have, just go ahead and install this out and just say open the installer file. It's an exe file that it gives you, and just say open this out. And yes, I'll say okay. I'll say accept. I'll say next, 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 and install. So I'm not doing anything different. I'm just going ahead and clicking all the default settings, and I'm installing my VS Code out here firstly. So I'm installing the VS Code. It will take like a minute to go ahead and install this out. And once installed, I'll go ahead and launch this out. It's a very lightweighted software. And this is the first page that you're going to see, telling to go ahead and select some color out here. So you can do it a light color or a dark color, or any kind of a color that you'd like out here. I'll say yes, color is great. And once that's done, these are all the selection options out here that you have, like file, edit, selection, view, go, run, terminal, and all these things out. What I'll do is I'll say file. I'll click on this one. I'll say open a new folder on my local or my machine. I'll just go into one of the folders, and I can just go ahead create a new folder out here saying JSON samples, and I can select this folder out here. And the very first time when you select a folder, you're going to get that, what, shall I go ahead and trust this out? I'll say trust. I'll say yes, I trust the folder. And this is what I do have right now. So I have the folder view in the right hand, in the left hand side, and I have the file that I can write in the right hand side. So if again, Visual Studio gives you a great way to go ahead and, let's say, store data or write files in different programming languages or different kind of syntaxing out here. And today we are trying to look at how do you write something known as a JSON, and then how do you write something known as an ARM template out here. So let's say if I want to write the details of a simple storage account in a notepad. Let's say I'm using notepad to write the details of a storage account, like what is the resource group name, what is the storage account name, what is the SKU of the storage account, what is the kind of the storage account, what is the tier of the storage account, how many containers it has, and all that stuff. Then I would start something like this. I would say resource group name is equal to something like test RG. I would say storage account name is equal to demo storage. I would say SKU is equal to standard LRS, standard LRS or standard underscore LRS, and so on and so forth. So I can have multiple properties defined inside my notepad file by using the equal to symbol and all that stuff. If I want to write the same thing in JSON, I would say add here. I would go to the Visual Studio. I'm not using the notepad anymore. If I'm thinking about JSON, I'm not using the notepad right now. I'll say new file, and I'll say something like storage details dot JSON JSON. The extension itself is JSON out here. I'll say enter, and as and when I enter here, it's gonna give me this particular page, telling that okay, fine. I said enter and I clicked on this file. I'm into this particular page, and in the bottom right hand of my screen, you are able to see that the language that I'm writing in is called as a JSON language. It's a JSON language basically that I'm writing here, and I can get started here by writing the, let's say, properties of the storage account out here. But again, in a JSON, you cannot directly start writing it. For example, you cannot directly say that okay, fine, it's a resource group name and etc. and say equal to something like this. It'll start throwing errors, telling that expected a JSON object or an array or a literal and all that stuff. Which means if you want to tell that you're writing JSON, you will have to open up a square bracket, sorry, open up a flower bracket and close a flower bracket. And you need to start writing anything in the form of a key value pair. What do I mean by that is this. This is the key, this is a value, a key and a value pair out here. So key and values. So in my case, let's say the resource group name is a key, and I would need to write a key in quotes telling resource group name, and the value, meaning let's say it's a demo RG or something like that, separated by a colon. So I'm putting a colon, and then I'll give the value again in quotes. I'll say some demo RG out here. This is the key value syntax that is used by JSON. So key value represented within this particular flower bracket out here, and I'm saying let's say the resource group name is demo RG and all these things. After that, I'll put a comma. I'll come down, and if I want to write the second property, each and every property needs to be separated by a comma out here. Let's say storage account name. I'll put it something like this. I'll say storage account name colon and give the name of the storage account, something like demo storage. And if I want to give the SKU of the storage account, then I'll put a comma, then I'll come here SKU, and then I'll say it is standard underscore LRS. Each and everything that I'm writing here is in a key value pair within the quotes, and each and every key value pair is separated by a comma out here. So three different properties. These are all the keys. These are all the values, and each and every key value pair is now separated by a comma out here. And it starts with a flower bracket, ends with a flower bracket, representing that this is a JSON format. So this is how I'll get started with JSON. So yes, before I move forward, any questions here? Anyone, any questions till here? Anyone, any questions till here that I can take?
There
Sir,
is
Madhu
under
here.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
there is at underscore at LRS.
Mm-hmm.
If we separate by hyphen means it won't take.
It will take, but it's not the right property. Again, you can do a hyphen also. It will take, there is no issue. But
Okay.
uh, property is called standard underscore LRS, so that's the reason I put it that way.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, any more questions here?
Sir, Madhu here, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Sir, I have some doubts on PowerShell. Can I ask?
Mm-hmm.
No?
Can I
Sir,
take it at the end of the session, please?
yeah,
Is
sure,
that
sure,
so?
sure.
Okay, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sure. Let's give like about 10 minutes at the end of the session and take the doubts and then move forward there. Right, so this was, let's say, a simple JSON. Now, if I want to put, let's say, for example, this storage account also has containers, and it looks like something like container has or containers have multiple properties within them, like name and also the access level, like public, private, blob, container, and all that stuff. And these are multiple containers, not one or two, multiple, which means an array. All these are simple objects in JSON. And if you want to declare an array, what you do is that you put something, firstly, the key out here. Again, you will have to give a comma, give a key telling that these are containers. And in order to represent an array, you put a, let's say, colon, open up and close the square bracket. A square bracket in JSON represents an array. In PowerShell, you were telling that it is string and then close that stuff, and then you were representing that this is an array. In JSON, if you put a square bracket out here, it means that it's an array. And inside that, now if I want to write all these properties like the name and the access level, I'll have to again put the square bracket out here, and I'll need to say name, let's say something like test container, comma, access level, and I would say something like private. This is properties of one container represented in the form of an object. And if I want to take the second container, I'll say comma, and again I'll say name, and I'll give some name like this container 1, and I'll put something called access level as private out here. So this is now, or this now becomes a JSON array out here right now. It now becomes a JSON array. All this object becomes a JSON array. Key here is containers. After that, I have multiple objects of a container represented in JSON, like the first container, the second container, third, fourth, fifth, and all these things are represented in a form of an array, JSON array out here. Yes, any questions regarding this one? Anyone, any questions still here?
Yeah, hi sir.
Mhm.
We don't need to so mention so like containers so like as a resource.
I'm sorry, I lost your voice.
Yeah, we are mentioning for containers, right? So under the number of containers. So same as
Mhm.
like that. Can we mention the resource group?
Uh, can you mention the resource group? Yes, you can mention the resource group also, for which you need to, let's say, declare, let's say, huge array. For example, I'll just copy everything. So this is my entire array. For example, if you want to also declare resource groups, so I'll say resource groups, and inside that, now resource groups, if you say it becomes an array, I'll need to, let's say, put an array out here, inside which I can now paste all my properties. This becomes the first resource group. If you want something second like that, just copy this entire thing. Sorry, just copy this entire thing, comma, put this out here. This will become demo rg1. So this is how it looks like. So you have the JSON starting here. Then you have resource groups. This is the first resource group. This is the second resource group. And even inside the first resource group, you have an array. So you can have multiple arrays inside the array. Whenever you want to open the array, you just need to, let's say, declare it in the form of a square bracket out here as such. Was this your question, and does this answer this?
Yes. No, thank you, thank you.
You're saying more questions here, guys. Now, this was just JSON, and these were the basics, or the basic understanding of JSON on how do you write the key value pair. So before I move ahead, any more questions that I can take on JSON, on what do you really mean by a JSON object and all these things?
Actually, here I have one doubt actually.
Good, please.
Uh, Here we are giving SKU for resource group now. If we didn't give,
SKU for research. Mhm.
yeah, if we didn't give location for storage account, is there
Mhm.
any chance to take automatically the location which we take for resource group, or we need to give
Again,
separate?
the thing here is that I am just giving some sample properties. I'm not creating a resource out here. So I am just giving
Okay,
these properties so that I can store it, but I'm not creating it. Now, using this same JSON, you won't be able to create it. The reason I'm going through this is because when we move into ARM templates, right, the JSON basics will help you in order to write the template. So
okay,
I'm
okay.
just showing you the sample JSON file on how it looks like. But when we go to actual ARM templates, which will help you create a resource, that's when things like location and all these things actually come into picture.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll talk about location and everything when we go there.
Sure. Thank you.
No problem. Yes, any more questions, guys? Right, so let me come back to my local machine. Uh, is indentation mandatory in JSON? No, indentation is not mandatory. You can have the JSON start anywhere, close anywhere, not mandatory at all. But I would say please make sure to follow the syntax out here. Again, if you go back into your JSON, right? If you don't give indentation, you just start writing JSON, shouldn't be a problem. But after writing the JSON, just say Control A, do a right click on VS Code and say Format Selection. This will go ahead and give you all the indentations in the right way out here. The reason I'm telling indentations is because it becomes at the end of the day when you write a big JSON file, it becomes easier for you to read it out. You can understand where things start, where things end, and all these things out here. So indentation is not mandatory, but it's a good to have property in a JSON out here. So I'm opening my VS Code out here. I have a couple of, let's say, things that I've done. So let me open up a folder and let me go into, let's say, one of the folders out here. Let's see. And I'll create a new folder. I'll say this is ARM templates. It's wrong, but I'm okay with that. And I'll go here. And so yes, so the same thing that I'm doing in my local machine. And before you start writing an ARM template, right? So you would need an extension for the ARM template. You cannot directly write the ARM template. You need to install something known as an ARM template extension in the VS Code so that VS Code can help you write an ARM template out here. For which just click on these. Just go to the left hand corner of your VS Code and click on the extensions out here, and this will load all the extensions. It's like an app store or a play store for, let's say, your VS Code, where you can go download, let's say, different extensions out here. Just search for ARM, and here the very first extension called ARM Template Tools by Microsoft. Please click on this one and hit the install button. Now this will take around a couple of seconds to go ahead and install. It should be, let's say, very quick. So I'll just go ahead, install something known as, let's say, the ARM template extension for you. And while this is getting installed, you can also, I would also suggest you to go ahead and, let's say, install something known as ARM template by Ben Coleman. You can install this also. And if you see, this is installed right now, and even this is now installed. It's now installing. And in my case, in my local machine, if I say Azure Resource Manager Template or ARM, I already have this installed. So I already have all these things installed out here. So I'll say, okay, great, not a problem. And what I'll do is that after opening a folder, I'll say Control plus N. Now this will go ahead, open a window for me, and it says, okay, fine, you know what? Select the language in which you want to write this out. And I'll click on select language, and I'll say Azure Resource Manager Template. I'll say, you know what, the language that I want to write is Azure Resource Manager Template. And in the bottom also, you can now see that it tells you that the language here, or the the template what you're writing is in an ARM style. Saying okay, fine, you're writing an ARM template, and what I'll do in order to start writing a template is I'll start by telling ARM. So I'm writing an ARM template, so I'll just say ARM, and as and when I type this out, right, it now goes ahead, loads all these things out, telling ARM exclamation, all these things out. So the very first thing is ARM exclamation. I'll just say enter. That's it. Once I said enter, I have my entire JSON syntax. I did not even write a single word. It just gave me the entire JSON syntax. Starting, or here again, everything is a key value pair. Starting from schema, content version, parameters, functions, variables, resources, and outputs. Again, if you observe, resources and functions, these two are arrays because they are now opening and closing the square bracket, and parameters and etc., these are list. They just have, let's say, a simple uh, flower bracket out here just beside them. And as in when you create a template, right, as in when you say ARM exclamation, it starts with something known as a schema. Again, you don't have to do anything about the schema. It is for Microsoft to validate the template. This is Microsoft validation. So when you're writing an ARM template, right, let's say you do something, some error out here, Microsoft every time will go back to this particular link, check whether the properties you're writing and etc., are they compatible with the Azure portal, or do you have an issue writing the ARM template and all these things out. So this is for purely validation purpose. It is for validation. You don't even have to touch this. Microsoft will, you don't even have to touch this out here. Then you have a content version wherein this is used for something known as versioning, meaning you want different versions of the same template. Let's say in the first version you want to create only one storage account, second version you want to create 2 or 3 storage accounts out here. You can maintain versions of your template, like you can say okay fine version 1, or you can say in the next iteration you can say version 2, or you want to, let's say, make some changes, you can say version 3. So you can maintain multiple copies of your template, but you can just get started with, let's say, version 1 out here. So schema and content version, these are two things that I'm not even touching. I am taking the way it is. I'll say okay fine, this is version 1, I'm good with that. Then comes something known as parameters. Functions are optional in nature, I can delete them out, I don't even need them. Then you have variables, then you have resources, then you have something known as outputs. Now let's start with resources. Let's understand parameters and variables and what they are being used or why they are being used. Let's start with something known as a resource block or a resources block out here. Resources, an array, helps you create multiple resources like storage account, like multiple storage accounts, not one, not two, but multiple. You can have a virtual machine created. You can have any resource that is there in the Azure portal created under the resource block. But since I know about, or since we know about storage account, we'll start there. I'll go inside this resources, say enter. Anywhere, you can just do one enter, two enters, anywhere is okay. I'm inside the resources right now, and I'll start typing ARM. And I want to know, it's now telling, okay, fine, there are multiple resources that you can create with ARM. What do you want to create today? I would say, you know what, I want to create a storage account. So I'll say ARM hyphen storage. This is what I want to create, a storage account in Azure portal. And using your arrow keys on your keyboard, you can move it up and down. But right now I want something known as ARM storage, specifically a storage account. I'll say enter. It gives me the entire syntax. I can simply take this template right now, deploy it into the Azure portal, have a storage account created. It's as simple as this. I didn't do anything. So I just said control N, selected the language called ARM. I said ARM exclamation. Then I came down to the resources. I said enter. I said arm hyphen storage storage, and then it gave me an entire block of code of JSON code to create a storage account out here. This is how simple it is. So neither did I write any, let's say, syntax. Neither did I know about object orientation, nothing. I just went ahead, started my journey by JSON, understanding what is the basic of JSON that I need. And then I started creating something known as a resource block out here. In here, these are all the key value pairs that I get. These are all the properties that I have. For example, you have a property called name. You have a property called type, API version, tags, location, kind, SKU, standard LRS, premium LRS, and all these things out. So what I'm going to do, okay,
So this
is
the
your
same thing will reflect in the Azure portal, sir.
if you deploy it, yes. Again, I'm just writing it right now. But if you deploy it in the Azure portal, the same thing will get reflected in the Azure portal as such.
Okay.
You will also see how to deploy it. How do you, let's say, deploy this out? So again, to deploy this out, I'll need to make some small changes. Reason being, the name cannot be just storage account one. It has to be unique. So I'll say it is demo storage ARM, demo store ARM. Uh, I'll say since this is EastUS2, I'll say EU2, something like this. So the name can be unique. Again, I'm telling that you can create any type of a resource using the ARM template, but Microsoft has to know what kind of a resource you're creating, for which Microsoft has something known as a resource identifier, telling that, you know what, this is Microsoft.storage / storage accounts. Again, this is something that I'm not editing, and I'm not even editing the API version. This is for Microsoft validation and Microsoft to understand what I'm doing. And then I have something called as tags, like tags of a resource. For example, display name, I can say it's storage. I can say comma, something like created by. I can say something like done. I can put a comma again. I can say created date or something like that, or billing code or something like this. Means that I can give multiple key value pairs inside something known as tags, and I can also, let's say, click on tags here in the arrow here that is just beside tags, and everything will collapse. So you can collapse and expand, and then you have a location wherein it is telling resource group dot location. Let's put this aside for a minute. I'll just delete this out, and I'll say I want to create this in East US 2. This is where I want to create in the kind storage v2 version 2. The SKU, the name here and the tier. So the name here is telling premium underscore. You will have to give it in the form of underscores out here. But let's say you don't know about it. Just come here under the name. Just open, close this brackets, and automatically it'll load it out. If it doesn't, just hit a control plus space on your keyboard, and it'll tell you what kind of a property it is. Is it standard LRS or standard GRS or RAGRS, etc. Let's say I take standard LRS. In here as well, I want to give a standard. So I'll say inside that control space, I'm now into standard out here right now. So this is my entire template. The changes that I did here are the name, added some tags, change the location to ECS2, and then the SKU to standard LRS. And I can just save this as ARM template or any name out here, say storage template, and in the format of the file type as JSON. It's a .json file. So now I have a .json file out here as such. Yes, any question? Guys, can you please go on mute, please? This is disturbing your entire class out here. Yes, any questions still here? So So you have a template, you have written a template. And how did you write it? Very simple. You said ARM, then went to resources and said ARM hyphen storage, and that gave you the entire template. Edited some properties. Now I created a template, but you cannot see the resource group right now because I did not really deploy the I did not really deploy the storage account. There is no storage account, nothing on my Azure portal that is got created yet. So if you now want to go ahead and use this template and deploy it, just go back into your Azure portal and search for deploy, and then you have something called deploy a custom template. So just click on deploy a custom template. It's telling automate this by, let's say, deploying a custom template and all that stuff. I'll say here build your own template, load the file, and in here just select the file that I've been working on. Let's see, ARM templates, this storage template. Let's say open. So whatever file that I have written in my, let's say, local machine, I'm let's say opening this out, and I'll say save. And here it's asking you which resource group that you want to go ahead and create this in. Now the only downside of ARM templates is that it cannot directly go ahead and create a resource group. You will have to have a resource group in place. So I'll just say this is a sample RG. Even if you don't have a resource group, the template creation or the template deployment will itself create a resource group out here. I'll say the region here is ECUS2 again. I'll say review and create. So I'm just taking my template, throwing it inside Azure portal, and I'm saying, you know what, I need a resource. Selling validation passed. I'll hit the create button out here. So just taking all the properties that you have declared inside this template, like the name, like let's say the location, let's say the SKU, and a couple of tags, and using that, it's going ahead and creating, let's say, an object called as, or a resource called as a storage account for you within the Azure portal. So it's telling, okay, fine, this is demo storage ARM EU2. That is what we declared out here, demo storage ARM EU2. And now it's telling this is accepted. It's going ahead and, let's say, creating this particular resource. And now it's going ahead and deploying the entire resource inside this particular resource group. Again, if you see, it's also telling that the resource group is created. And in the right hand corner, you get a notification telling that, you know what, deployment succeeded. And you can go here and look at the resource. So now I have a storage account with multiple properties like replication, LRS, tags, display name created by billing code. All of these came from my ARM template out here. So simply created an ARM, deployed it onto the Azure portal, and my job is done. Within, let's say, a few steps out here without actually going into the programming of it. I just went ahead, created all these things, and that's it. My job's done there. Yes, any questions that I can take till you?
Question, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Go ahead,
Sir,
please.
if we take a if we take a resource group, so we have
Mm-hmm.
creating a resource group. We have used Azure Portal tools. So instead of that, we have used PowerShell. Thereafter, we have used JSON. So in
Mm-hmm.
real-time work, which is the most reliable way to create a resource group? So because why we need to go with these multiple kind of things to create a resource group, and which one is the most reliable in the real-time work?
There is nothing called reliable or non-reliable. Again, it just depends upon the knowledge stack that you're using. You can either use the portal, but if you have multiple resource groups that you need to create, then you'll need to come with a programming language like PowerShell or, let's say, something like Terraforms. So it just depends upon what you're trying to really achieve. Depending upon that,
I mean,
you can either use the portal.
no, I mean, so if we go with the JSON, it is very simple
Mhm.
because we need not to boggle our head because just by typing something,
But that's
okay,
right.
so
You
it is
cannot
taking
create a
everything.
resource group using a JSON, right? Did I create a resource group using a JSON? No, I did not. I went into the portal and still went and created a resource group. In that case, then if I have to, let's say, create a resource group, then I'll have to rely upon something like a PowerShell if you need multiple resource groups out here.
So it depends on the
So
requirement of.
completely.
You
It
mean that?
depends upon what you're really working on and what kind of a requirement that you really have. And again, you never know what kind of a requirement that you actually get. So it's better to be prepared with all these
Oh,
tools out there. And then you can suggest, okay, fine, you can use PowerShell or you can use ARM or you can use Terraform, something like that.
and one more thing, do we do we do same sort of thing in the JSON as well as in the PowerShell?
Do we do the same sort of thing in JSON as well as the partial? Again, JSON is a
Exactly.
specialist in creating a resource. PowerShell is a specialist in managing a resource. But whatever that you do with PowerShell, you can more or less do the same thing with JSON as well.
Okay. So JSON is a, you mean that it's a more kind of refined thing, making the things easy and simple.
It's actually very easier. If you compare it with PowerShell, it's actually easier.
Okay. So in real time, so it depends upon the requirement. If there is a need
Exactly.
for PowerShell, we go with that. If there is a need for JSON, then we go with that. So it
Not
depends on
only that,
requirement, moreover.
you might also, let's say, go with a combination of both PowerShell and ARM. There are, let's say, scenarios.
Oh,
There are very good scenarios wherein we combine PowerShell. Let's say the first step goes ahead and creates a resource group using PowerShell. The second step goes ahead, deploys the template using a PowerShell script. Instead of me going to the portal and deploying this out, I can take a PowerShell, deploy it out. So yes, it's a combination that we kind of work with.
okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, more
So it
questions, okay.
means can't we create
Mhm.
resources through AML?
Sorry, can you come again, please?
So it means we can't create resources through this template or
No, we just created it, right? So we just took the template, we created resources using that particular template, like a storage account. We did.
but
The only thing that
you
you,
have created resources in Azure portal, right? We are not using the script for this.
I have created resource group in the Azure portal, not the resources. So two things out here. I created a resource group using the portal and I deployed it using a template. I did not go ahead to storage account and sorry, I did not go ahead to storage account and write the name and all these things, right? I did not do that today. I just went ahead, took my entire template and I deployed it out there. So I just use programmatic approach itself.
Okay, sir. Thank
Yes, there was one
Uh,
question on PowerShell. I'll
yeah,
take that.
like storage account, we can create resource group also in this template, or we cannot create storage resource group in this.
So you can create resource group, but again for resource group you need to come with something known as linked templates and custom templates and all that stuff.
Okay,
It's not worth creating a resource group using a JSON. Like resource group is a very simple resource, and while you are deploying this particular JSON file using some practice like Azure DevOps, the resource group is itself created. So you do not even have to, let's say, put a new command out there to create it out there. But you cannot
okay,
directly create a resource group using the template. You'll need to have a resource group to deploy the template out there.
okay. Thank you.
From If someone had a question on PowerShell, I said I'll take it later, so I can take it right now if you still have the
Yeah,
same
Madhu
question
here,
on
sir.
that. Good, Madhu.
Sir, actually, for example, if you create a storage accounts or resource something like something using PowerShell,
Hmm. Okay.
so if I want to change any access layers or if I want to move the data from one resource group to another resource group for some reason, so I'm
Hmm.
using the same PowerShell to do this kind of stuff.
Okay. I mean,
By using
you're
PowerShell,
asking me
how you can change this
how you
means
can change
access
this.
layers and everything
Okay. Very firstly,
after
what do you want to
after
change?
creating storage accounts.
Hmm. Correct.
After
So
creating
very
storage
first,
account,
hmm
I just want to change my access tier.
when you say
So
access
if
tier, uh, do you
yes,
mean from hot to cool, cool to hot, something like that?
yeah, that
Okay. So to change it, to modify something, how did you change the execution policy of your PowerShell?
set execution policy,
Set hyphen execution policy,
set up in execution.
which means set is a command to modify.
Yes.
Now just perform something called, let's open my PowerShell out here. Okay, this is the PowerShell normal one. Let's open the PowerShell ISC. It's PowerShell ISC right now. And let's say I have a storage account right now. Let's say the access tier here is hot. I want to change it to cool. So I'll simply say set hyphen AZ storage account. I want to go ahead and let's say set a property of a particular resource, storage account that is created in the Azure portal. I'll say hyphen name of the storage account. Name. I'll say hyphen resource group name where the storage account is actually setting in, which I think is a sample RG or something like that. Yes, sample RG. And after that, I'll now say hyphen access tier to cool. It says additional charges will apply. I'll say yes. And it now goes through and it did went ahead and changed the tier to cool. So if I come back to the Azure portal, just refresh my screen, the access tier right now is cool. So you can set all those properties or you can modify all those properties which are allowed to be modified, which means you cannot change the location or you cannot change something like performance from standard to premium, all these things out. But yes, access tier or the replication from LRS to GRS to GRS to RAGRS, this is something which can be changed out here as such. So it's a simple command which is set hyphen AZ storage account, the name of the storage account, name of the resource group, and the tier that you want to change out here as such. Was this your question and does that answer this?
Yes, yes, that's it. Sir, and one thing, is it possible to move the resources from one resource group to another resource group using PowerShell?
Yes, it is possible to move. So for which, if you want to move something, again, if you look at the portal, it allows you to move out here, right? So it tells you, okay, fine, where do you want to move it? Which resource group that you want to move it. I'll say yes, this is the resource group that I want to move it. For example, if you want to move a particular resource using PowerShell, say move hyphen AZ storage account. Let's see if I have something like okay, move hyphen AZ resource. So just check this out on move hyphen AZ resource command. Move resources to a new resource group and etc. Just go to the examples. And here, if you see this, it's telling get hyphen AZ resource, the resource ID of something, and then move hyphen resource, the resource ID, destination resource group name, the name of the destination resource group out here. So this command will help you move a particular resource out here from one, let's say resource group to the other using PowerShell.